Quick to introduce you guys to Sergio Gomez. We are so proud to be working with him, so thankful for his friendship, for him as an artist. We would not be where we are today without his support, without his mentoring. And so I'm just so honored to have him here and be the last show of 2015 for him. So thank you so much, and he's going to grace us with wonderful artist talk.
Thank you. Thanks everybody, I'll be brief. I know some of you have been waiting, so I just say thank you and that's it. I want to first thank, of course, White Ripple Gallery and Jocelyn and her husband Tom for welcoming the show here in their space. It's really something that we talked about just about a year ago when we were talking and discussing the idea of an exhibition. So it's really nice to have a full year ahead of you to work on an idea for the show. So this show coincided with my birthday, which is coming up on Wednesday. So I thought it would be a good time to kind of do a reflective type of exhibition where I look back at my career for the last 20 years and select pieces that have been an important part of my trajectory for the last 20 years. So what I'll do is I'll do a quick overview of some of the highlights in the show. Kind of give you some of the background behind the pieces, not really tell you what they mean or what they're about, because then it's not fun to see the work when somebody already told you what's about, right? Art is about the conversation that we create as we engage with the work. Some feedback on what inspired me to make some of these pieces and what still inspires me to make the work that I do today. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start on that side. That's the oldest piece in the show. It's called Conversations with the Flesh. It's a piece from 1994, so it's about 21 years old or so. So it's been a while. I didn't realize I was that old until I put the show together. So, this piece was done while I was a student at Governor State University. But it's one of the pieces that kind of defined for me what I wanted to do for the rest few years after this painting. I consider my professional career began when I started to do this type of work. As you are in college, you do a lot of formative type of work that kind of teaches you the materials, techniques, and ideas, but many times you don't know what you're doing. You're just testing and trying and playing with material. But there comes a point in which you kind of discover what's yours, what's your language, and what kind of resonates with you as an artist. And for me, this was the piece that kind of began this whole thing that I'm still doing today. The work has to do with my own personal story. For those of you who do not know, I grew up in Mexico. I was born in the city of Puebla. I grew up in Mexico City, and at the age of 16, my parents and myself, we came to the city of Joliet, which is only about, maybe 45 minutes south of Chicago, southwest of Chicago. And so we came there because my dad is a church minister. He's now retired after 50 years of working for the church. And when we came to work with immigrants who had just arrived to Chicago area. So kind of a lot of the work that we did was helping them out, and as they would come in and had no idea, of anything in the United States, so we did a lot of help, and that was kind of the thing that we were doing. By the time I did this painting, I had been here already for a few years, so I was, I think, 21 or so. So this painting for me was kind of a search for identity. When you are an immigrant and you go to a different country, especially when you come here at the age of 16, where you're still kind of trying to figure out who you are, as a young person. But by the time I was 20, I was still trying to figure out who I was. What was this whole Americanism, this whole American culture, and I guess questioning who I am, and after that, what am I here for? The existential questions that we all approach at some point in our lives. And for me, this is when this painting began. So this painting has a lot of symbolism. You see the big mask, which the mask comes from pre-Columbian cultures, like an Aztec mask that you'll find in Mexico. And so behind the mask there are figures that are kind of on fire and almost like escaping, going out of within this head figure. There's also, when you get close to it, maybe you'll find that there's a little picture of the Statue of Liberty. It's a picture that I took when I took a trip to New York with some friends from college. And it was for me very impressive as being an immigrant and then being in front of the Statue of Liberty, a symbol that you see everywhere. Doesn't matter where you are in the world, that's a symbol of the American life, the American dream. And so I took that picture and then I cut it out and pasted it on in the painting itself. Again, is this idea of why am I here, and what does that mean? What does it mean for me? This search for identity. And the search for identity is a common theme if you look at historical Mexican painting done in this side of the border, where we go through a process or a period in which we look at our own past and our own history of who we are, where do we come from, because we are within a new context. So this kind of piece brings me back to the part of my history, going back to Mexico, and connects me to my new reality, which is of course being here in the United States. But then it goes beyond that. It's also about the spiritual concerns that I worked with for many years, beginning with this painting. The painting is called Conversations with the Flesh, and it's this idea of conversing with one's own desires, one's own dreams, and this idea of, in biblical New Testament, you find a lot of narrative concerning the flesh versus the spirit, the spirit versus the flesh. So this piece for me is kind of my own conversation with my own flesh. And again, I was 21, so I don't think, it's a lot of trying to figure out who you are and so forth. So the piece has, as far as materials, has sand and earth mixed with the paint, and that kind of conceptually brings you back to the beginning of the Old Testament, where in the book of Genesis God creates man from the earth, from sand. So in that sense, again, the flesh versus the spirit. So it has all these levels of meaning that for me were important. I was trying to figure out who I was and what is it that I was trying to do with my own work. So after this piece, I think the next year, this is from 94, I think 95, that's when I made the one that's on your right, my left. And that's why they're kind of opposites on this side, because it's kind of like the flesh, the spirit on the other side. It's painted completely different, while this one is on canvas and has sand, and it's a lot of texture, it has those tactile qualities. On the one that you see on your right, that painting is made on paper, and it's made out of pieces of paper. It's not one full sheet of paper, but rather small pieces all cut up together and glued together, and that created that rectangular shape. The way it's painted is also completely different to the one on my right, where that one is the sand and again the texture. This one is all the dripping of the paint that you can see is very fluid, very liquid, translucent. And this painting, I titled it I Crucify My Old Identity. And again, it has those connotations of my spiritual beliefs and concerns and connections. And I've always wanted to do a painting of the crucifixion. I wanted to do a painting of the Last Supper and a painting of the Ascension. And so this was my version of the crucifixion after studying historical art from Western tradition and looking at all the paintings of Christ on the cross. I wanted to do my own version, something that was unique to me. I didn't want to do the same thing. So the Christ figure is not as it would normally depicted in Western tradition, where the Christ is is bleeding and it's about the suffering. But mine was completely different. Mine was about renewal. And so the figure is about, the whole painting is about this renewal. So that's why the paper is all these cut out pieces that create a new piece. And so all the figures is myself crucifying myself. That's why it's called I Crucify My Old Identity. It's this idea of every day, looking at one's life and trying to make it better too, and renewing that process of life. So something that I started to do with these two paintings is I started to trace myself in the work. So that's why the figures are my size. Not by coincidence, but because I drew it myself. And when I did these two paintings, I was at Governor State University, and what I would do is, I would go there with my friends, Javier and I. We would go there early and stay out till late at night every day. We loved what we did, but I would wait until everybody was gone to trace myself. I know, they would make me laugh, my friends, and it was kind of awkward for me to be tracing myself on the work. And my professor Joyce Morita is here, and hi Joyce. And she saw, the beginning of my work, and I have a lot to thank her for what I am today, because first she allowed me to paint on the wall these large pieces in the studio as a student, and gave me a feedback, gave me a lot of direction, and allowed me to find my own voice as these images began to emerge in my work. And Joyce has been great support of my work, and I think that's important, that's special, and I want to just take a minute to thank Joyce for this, because as I look at this show the last 20 years, there's people that invest things in you, in your life. People invest time, invest words, invest effort, and Joyce has done all of those, invest friendship, and over the years, her and her husband have invested a lot in me, and it's my desire to make them proud too, as well as I continue my journey. And these are my work's about personhood, and these relationships that we encounter across life as we go through life, such as the relationship with your mentor, with your professor, with people that even you don't know who they are, but you encounter every day. And so that's why the figures themselves in all my work are faceless. They have no face, they have no specific ethnicity, because even though they start with my silhouette, I want them to be universal. They could be any one of us from anywhere in the world. And how much more now as we see everything that's happening in the news, and just yesterday, and all these bombings and all these things. At the end of the day, we remove all our facade and all our clothing. We are all people, right? And we are all equal in that sense. And that's what I want to embody in my work as well. That all these figures are all of us and any one of us. So after these two pieces, which kind of again were like anchors in the way I continue my career. Once I left Governor State University, I took a year off and went and worked as a graphic design. And then I enrolled, that's when I got married with my wife, Janina, when we were at Governor State, and we took a year off. And then I decided to go back to school. We thought it would be great to go and finish up my Master of Fine Arts. And that's where this piece was created while I was at Northern Illinois University, which is part of another series of work that again were an anchor in the way I approach my work after that. This figure is kind of it's a duality piece where a lot of pieces after this have this dual component. So you see the glowing figure, which is like this washy or this wash kind of painterly figure that you see right away with his hands crossed. But that's behind it in the red outline, which is just a standing figure, kind of like in this position. Again, this kind of like the spirit versus the flesh duality that I like to continue working. It's a reflective piece. It's a piece about reflection, about self-examination, self-pondering of who we are, and in this journey of life, something that I started doing while I was also at Northern is because that's when my son Alec was born, and that completely changed my life. When you have a kid and you see it come out, like, wow, what do I do with this thing? And and then you cannot give it back to the parents because you are the parents, right? So you see these kids grow up, and that completely changes your perspective on life. And I started to register their growth. Like I would use them just as I would trace myself. I started to trace them since they were little babies. And in the entrance of the gallery, you can see it on your way out, on the left-hand side, there's a painting with a circle on the top, and that's a figure of, I think that's Ali, when he was really small. And, you know, it's been really fun for me to record life as it happens, this journey of life, of the kids being born to as I grow old as well, and to see myself as an older individual, now with a lot of white hair. So it's, you know, to see myself in that journey, and then what is my spiritual awareness throughout that journey, how it has changed from 20 years to what I am now, and how it will change for the next 20 years or so. So that's what I try to register in my work. So after this piece and many other pieces came, like, you know, with similar sensitivities. In 20,000, this one in the back, I think it's 2013, the National Museum of Mexican Art in Chicago invited me to do a solo show. And as part of the conversation of what to do for the show with the curator there, I requested if I could do a piece specifically for the show, but do it in the museum itself versus preparing it ahead of time. And it was kind of a long process of conversing with the curator, because normally when you do a museum show, you have to talk to the curator what you're going to show. You don't just show up with the work. You know, it has to be a lot of preparation. So for me to say, you know, I want to do a piece, but I don't know what it is, for me, it had to build trust with the museum and with the curator so that they could let me do it, and they agreed to it. So this piece was done 2 days before the opening at the National Museum of Mexican Art, and I had 2 days to work on it, but I was also teaching, so I couldn't do it during the day, so I had to go after class and work 2.5 hours on one day and 2.5 hours on the other day, so it was a total of 5 hours which this piece was done, and it's documented. I have in YouTube the whole video where you can see the whole process as the piece was made. But the idea of this piece is, and Janina knows this, when I do a live drawing, I like the emotion of not knowing exactly what I'm going to do. But this was a museum, so I was more stressed out of not knowing what I wanted to do. And what I was inspired by is the museum is right in the Mexican community in Pilsen in Chicago. So it's right in the heart of the neighborhood of you know, people who are like me, you know, many of them who grew up in Mexico. You can go out in the museum in that area and you can speak Spanish, and you know, it's like being back in Mexico. So I wanted to do a piece that related to it. I didn't know exactly what to do, and on the way to the museum with all my supplies, and I was thinking and drawing. I have some sketches that I had done prior to, you know, some ideas of what I wanted to do. Nothing like this one. But then as I was driving, I saw on the seat of the passenger side a dollar bill in my car. And I saw it, and it kind of dawned on me, like, you know, a lot of migration is about the dollar bill. You know, the dollar bill, you can show it anywhere in the world. It's a world currency. It's a symbol of power. It's a symbol of the American dream. You know, when we come to this country, we come looking for this, right? For the bill, for the American dream, the dollar, and what's such an iconic, powerful image this is, that is understood, just like the figure is understood worldwide because of its impact. And so that was kind of the inspiration for the piece. So I took the dollar, did some sketches once I got to the museum, and that's where the piece was born. So I replaced the center of the bill with kind of again, just a silhouette figure. So it could be any one of us. The word dollar replaced for the word dolor, which in Spanish means pain. So, and it's just coincidence that they're very close words. So $1 is one pain. Got this idea that every dollar is somebody's pain. On the On this side of the downer, you see the wall that divides the border, U.S.-Mexico border. You know, the struggle of the immigrant, and many of them die in the desert. And many children die in the desert as well that we don't hear about. So this side kind of is the painful side of that, where you see the nails kind of sticking in the head. This other side is kind of like the aftermath, the result. Out of this anguish and pain, there comes also hope. So there's this kind of like leaves, plants, kind of like the beginning of a new life. It's for the next generation. In the immigrant family, usually the first generation that comes here, the ones that go through all the struggle of crossing the border, facing resistance and rejection and all that I saw with my own eyes. I lived it, but then now I have children, and this is kind of like the offspring out of that, the second, third generation that moves on and continues. And here's another figure that's kind of, again, reaching out for hope. And it's funny, I was looking at it, I didn't realize that's very similar, this figure, to the one from 94, the one on the upper right-hand side. Even in my darker pieces, there's always a sense of hope somewhere. Because I believe in life, even in the darkest moments, like what we saw yesterday or the day before in the news, there's always hope. There's always that sense that invites us to there's something better, something else beyond this life. So that's what this piece is about, and that's how this one was born. Another piece I want to talk about briefly is there's a square piece right by the door over there. It's like a little tree, and right at the center of the painting, maybe I can just move a little bit this way you can see. This painting right here is, I don't remember what year, I think it's about 6 years old or so. And when my parents retired, and they decided to go back to Mexico, I always lived with my parents until I was married with Janine. Until I was married with Janine. I never left to college because, well, there were many reasons. One, economic, I just couldn't afford it to live outside the house. So I commuted to Chicago, went to Governor State throughout my school years. And also it was hard because my parents needed a lot of help because they came here to United States when they were already in their 50s. So for them, the language was a big barrier. They couldn't speak English well. So it was important for me to stay by them and help them out. And when they retired to Mexico, that's when I did this painting, which is a tree, that's it's kind of like in the winters, the leaves are kind of falling already, but it has all this rooted of that tree. And for me, the tree kind of symbolized the heritage of my parents in me, in my life, and the rooted life that they have left for me to follow, and something that I want to leave behind for my children as well. And this is a piece that has been changing over the years. Something I didn't notice is that when I did the piece, and I did it late at night, before I went to bed, I put down the plastic knife that I used to scoop the paint, and it landed in the painting and it kind of got stuck into it. So there's a little knife here. It has no meaning other than it just landed there. I couldn't pull it out. Because sometimes people ask, what does that mean? I don't know. I just couldn't get it out. But I kind of like that, that it just landed between the two, the above and below. It also has kind of a spiritual connotation of even though they're far away from a distance, and I know eventually they'll be gone from this life, as we all will. None of us are here permanently, but then again, our history, what we leave behind, can be rooted by the choices we make. And this piece was in my basement for a while, and then I didn't show it for a long time, and then it started to get wrinkled. And Janina said, hey, I was going to bring it for this show. She said, you see that it's got some wrinkles? And so I sort of like the wrinkles, so I just wrinkled it all up a lot more. And I kind of liked it because it it became something that's aged, that's aging, such as our life ages, such as my parents now that they're in Mexico. My dad is 82 now, so he's aged and he's getting older. Sam is getting older too, and so this kind of roughness in it, it doesn't bother me. I think it's part of that symbolism of the, there's no such thing as a precious object. It's just paint on canvas, and such as all the other pieces. All the only special meaning for me is what it means when I painted, and the fact that it keeps deteriorating and changing. I kind of enjoy that, and I don't know how much it will change over the next few years. And the last pieces that I have here is some small drawings. Those are the most recent ones. I love charcoal, and throughout my career I always go back to charcoal on and off, such as the large drawing that is charcoal. This is charcoal, and I love charcoal. Since I was in Joy's class, art drawing, I always loved charcoal, and charcoal has this beautiful quality that you are in direct touch with it, unlike all the other mediums, paint and everything else. There's a mediator, which is the brush or whatever other tools you're using. Kind of like in pottery, you have to use your hands. And same with charcoal, you have to use your fingers, and it's messy. And I always enjoy that. You can erase with that too. So that kind of that's what I'm doing right now. Some small pieces, and I'm working in the studio in a series of small works that I should have hopefully done in the next couple of weeks. And around the corner, you'll see a couple of pieces that relate to the tall piece that's on that wall between the two red pieces there. I just mentioned that really quickly. It's a series of works where the figure is floating in space rather than being grounded on the floor. And it's a series that I'm still kind of defining the gravity of. And also I'm playing with different materials. That one, the figure is paper. So the brown color of the figure is the actual color of the paper. It's the brown butcher paper that you buy at the hardware store. That's kind of what it is. The one on the right is a small head. That's the word grace. I did a series a couple years ago that was called 16 Words of Hope for a Messed Up World, and it's a series that I did for a special show, and we got to travel to Vienna. And when he came back, all the pieces have sold except that one, the word grace, the last one, that's still available out of the 16. And even this idea of, when you look at the world, how messed up it is, if you can think of, if you could pick 16 words to give hope, what would those words be? So that was my exercise for me of selecting those 16 words and then making a painting out of each one. So grace is the one that's left. And on the left-hand side, the last one that I'll talk about is a little red painting with a figure in the middle, a black and white figure. I love to read Time magazine, and and I collect those, and then I give them to my father-in-law too, and we both like to read them. Time magazine, and I did a series that was called Lost Identity series, where I took cutouts from the magazine, from a president to a Chinese worker in a factory, and just remove all the identifiers of who this person is, and just neutralize it with black and white paint. And as a series, it's interesting to see I only brought one, but series, interesting to see all these people who are living completely different lives. But then when you remove all the all the facade that we have, that we build as we go through life, we're all the same, right? And the only thing I left uncovered, unpainted, were the eyes of the individuals. And again, that for me was kind of a process of understanding again this whole journey of life. And if I have to summarize kind of what I've said and what my work is about, I would say that my work is about the cycle of life from the moment we are born to the moment we die, and then understanding the spiritual awareness throughout that cycle of birth to death. And that kind of summarizes what I do. So I don't know if you have any questions. I will be happy to answer any questions. If not, I'll be happy to talk to anyone individually.
Thank you.
Thanks everyone.